put yourself in the shoes of the patriots, the men that lived out here in these mountains in North Carolina. A officer from the British Army has basically put out a message to everyone around saying that if you're not with them, they're going to destroy you. And they're basically daring you to fight. What would you do? Well, the answer to that question here in North Carolina and South Carolina is right here at this battlefield called Kings Mountain. The Patriots answered that call, and it's not the call Ferguson expected. He found out real fast what the Overmountain men would do to him. So here in a minute, I'm going to flip this camera around. I'm going to have you kind of take a look at what we're looking at when we talk about Kings Mountain. Because way off in the distance here, just over that ridge right there, is the main ridge line where Patrick Ferguson and his men would have been. And the signage that's out here talks about what this forest looked like back then. And we can't really imagine today, unless you've been to some place like maybe Sequoia National Park where they have these giant trees in this cleared out area, what this would have looked like. Of course, the trees weren't as tall as those sequoia trees, but they were massive, massive trees out here that had been growing for generations, and they dotted the landscape, and it was pretty cleared out. Well, during the summertime and spring, you can't see this field very well past the trees. There's lots of underbrush and stuff that's covering up this battlefield. The soldiers at that time talked about how they were able to see their enemy for long distances, and they're able to go through this landscape without much interference with the underbrush. Okay, so looking off in the distance here, we have this ridge line and then another ridge line, and then it goes all the way up to the top where Ferguson and his men were. But you can kind of see the landscape here with all these trees dotting the landscape. At the end of this battle, the soldiers that fought for the Loyalists were actually complaining about how this provided good coverage for those Patriot soldiers and that they were able to fight in the way that they knew how to fight. Whereas Loyalists had been trained to fight in those ranks for the British Army. And so they're used to that Napoleonic warfare, shoulder to shoulder, maneuvering and using those brown bess muskets. That doesn't work very well up here. You're at the top of the hill playing king of the hill, if you will. And you have soldiers basically moving up from a steep location here straight up. When you fire downhill, chances are you're going to be firing over their head until they get right on top of your position. Now, if you've watched my videos at all for any length of time, you know I'm pretty much a history nerd. And walking in these places, I like putting myself in the shoes of the people that would have been here. And I like walking in their footsteps. And a road like the one that's behind me here is simply that. It says Colonial Road. This is a road that would have been here during colonial time. They would have taken this road up and down these mountains. As a matter of fact, when I was out here as a kid, many, many years ago in the hills of North Carolina, there were many roads that were still dirt roads. They were not paved. They probably didn't have the internet in here until the early 2000s, but these old roads, they used to take wagons up and down and horses up and down through these paths, and they were well-known paths for these farmers and mountain men to get back and forth on. So I can imagine that these soldiers probably came across this road, a well-worn road, during the colonial period, coming up here for the battle. And I'm gonna take you down this road and just kind of walk you along. You're gonna see my shadow on the ground as we're walking, but this is kind of a cool, unique path to take. I figured I'd take the path uphill. It looks a little bit better going uphill. And I'm gonna get down there and start this video and then take you up this road and show you what it looks like from down there. It's a pretty unique experience that you only get in so many places, to be able to walk in such a raw landscape like this on the historic Colonial Road down to a monument. We're moving right along here on this Colonial Road. One of the things I noticed about this as I was coming downhill is the big cracks in the ground here from all of the erosion, from where the water runs through whenever it rains out here. It's a pretty unique perspective out here on this field. So many, many years ago, that old weathered stone, right around 1815, was placed here. And according to this, that stone had this information on it. It said, "Sacred to the memory of Major William Chronicle, Captain John Maddox, William Robb, and John Boyd, who were killed at this place on the 7th of October, 1780, fighting in defense of America. Colonel Ferguson, an officer of His Britannic Majesty, was defeated and killed at this place on the 7th of October, 1780. And it says this stone was placed in 1914. This is pretty amazing. This weathered stone. And I'll do a slow motion video of this so you can kind of get a better look at it. You see some scratches in there from where maybe words were, but there's really not much to look at other than the fact that this is a very old stone sitting here. So there's a sign out here at one of the stops that talks about some of the boys that fought out here. And it says that the boys were local boys that knew the area well, from South Fork Settlement, and had helped the Whig colonels scout out where the Kings Mountain men had taken their stand. 25-year-old Major William Chronicle ordered his militia to face the hill. Many a man knew he would have to face close relatives or neighbors among the Tories they would soon fight. Again, we are talking about an American Civil War. We're not talking about just a revolution against a foreign entity coming in here to fight. We're talking about Patrick Ferguson, who was the inspector of these units, coming out here and raising up 1,000 soldiers at least for these militias of Tories, these Fusiliers. And he's creating this army out of the local population. This is what the Crown is really focused on. They think that if they come over here, they have people, subjects that are loyal to the Crown, that are going to put down the rebellion in the states or in the colonies. That's the way it's looked at. But the rebellion in the colonies is not just a rebellion. It's a complete movement of people that are tired of being pushed around, essentially, and having this government force these taxes and things down their throat. And I'm sure there were other reasons behind it too. Obviously, when the wealthy gets behind something, it has more to do with money than it has to do with anything else. So another stop that you can make out here at the Battle of Kings Mountain is a stone that's on the hill opposite of the stone that we were just at. This stone is supposedly to mark a spot where William Chronicle actually fell, wounded here at this location, just on this side of the hill. This is at the onset of this fight. Now, if you look down this way, that's where we just were, right there, at the very bottom. So it's kind of like a wayside little path that comes up here. It's paved. It is not exactly ADA friendly, if you will. If you're in a wheelchair, you're not exactly going to be wheeling up to the top of this hill. But it's not strenuous. It's not tough at all by any means. I can definitely get around here with real ease. So, and it's not something that's going to wind you or make you breathless getting up here. So if you come out to this field, hit all of these little spots up because they're extremely important to the story of Kings Mountain. And not to mention, it's pretty neat seeing something that's been up here on this hill since the 1800s. Now, I kind of want to pause here for a second because you really don't get a good feel for this place unless you're right up on top of it. And you can kind of see up here behind me the grade that this takes all the way to the top here at Kings Mountain. This is an extremely difficult position for anybody to be in, going up that hill directly with a gun in your hand trying to fight the enemy going towards the top. This is pretty neat out here. So now I wanted to take the time here from a distance with the water here, the monument off in the distance and the other one up on the hillside there, to kind of tell the story about what took place in this area. So that monument is actually the second oldest monument in the United States, or memorial to any kind of action that happened on any battlefield. It was dedicated July 4th of 1815 by William McLean out here at this location. At that spot, what you would have seen if you were here during the battle, Major Chronicle is there with his men, and he tells his men to face the hill. And as he tells his men to face the hill, a volley comes down, strikes and kills him and 3 others. Ironically enough, it was a John, a William, a John, and another William. When all 4 of those men go down with that battle, Lieutenant Colonel Hambright has to take over. And as they start to go up this hill, he takes a wound in his thigh, which fills up his boot with blood. As he's going up the hill, his men are asking if he wants to dismount. And he actually refuses to dismount that horse because he's afraid that it's going to make his men not want to fight. It's going to scare them. So he stays on the horse regardless of what his health is like. Well, on this hillside, heading up in this direction here, there's a 16-year-old boy. And that 16-year-old boy, as he heads up to the hillside here, ends up taking a bayonet, running down into his thigh. And he ends up on the ground with that bayonet, but he shoots and kills the aggressor that ends up stabbing him. As the soldiers are passing by this 16-year-old, they realize that the young boy's got a bayonet in his thigh, and they reach down to help him out. This is the kind of hand-to-hand craziness that's happening out here on this hillside for what people think is just kind of a small battle that happens here October 7th of 1780. This is a major event. A lot of these men that are out here from the British side are some of the same soldiers that were involved in the fighting in and around the South Carolina area. So they've been fighting before, and had these over mountain men face them on a flat level plain, this fight might have turned out different, but it didn't. And it's really because of the tenacity of the fighters here, their bravery, and the landscape of where we're looking at today. I'm roughly in the position where Cleveland's men were, and it pretty much stretches all along this area here. This is the North Carolinians we're talking about. And I pause here for a story about a man named Gordon who gets to the top of this hill and he's facing the enemy. Again, a lot of the accounts that we have on the internet make this as simple as lines are charging up the hill and shooting at each other, and then they defeat the British at the top. It's not that simple. This man named Gordon goes to the top and finds a loyal militia officer and grabs him by the braid of the hair. And he starts dragging him down the hill. Well, when he gets him part of the way down the hill, that militia officer gets his senses about him, reaches for his pistol, and shoots Gordon and breaks his arm with that pistol. Gordon, with the only recourse that he has left, reaches for his sword and stabs that officer with that sword up there on that hill. kills him. That is real up close and personal. And the speech that was given prior to all of this was essentially, up there is your enemy, up there is the enemy to mankind. They are all cowards, and if they were not, they would be fighting alongside you for the freedom of this country. That's a rough estimate of what the words were said. But think about those words and how heavy they were to these patriots down here at the base of this hill. They are the enemy to all mankind. The men at the top of this hill, where that statue is, as you can see, just above me here. Let's see if I can get it in the screen. Right there. The men at the top of this hill being labeled as the enemy of all mankind. They weren't just the enemy. They were neighbors. They were people that lived in the same areas that these men down here at the base of this hill were from. But that fired them up to the point to be able to achieve the victory here and do things like drag a man down the hill and stab him with a sword. It's pretty wild. Now, the position that I'm at right now, Colonel Williams would have been here with his men heading up this hill in front of me, these South Carolinians. Colonel Williams is important to the story because we just recently went to Musgrove Mill. Colonel Williams led 200 men there at Musgrove Mill in the battle and was successful at basically checking and defeating a superior loyal force there at Musgrove Mill. He was an excellent leader by all accounts, but as he heads up this hill into this fight, he's heading headlong into this with his men, and at some point in time, I believe it's shortly thereafter, or in the melee, he ends up getting struck and wounded pretty bad, pretty seriously. At the end of this battle, when he regains his consciousness and he's about himself once more, he tells them, for God's sakes, men, don't give up the hill. And then when he finds out about Patrick Ferguson dying and the battle being won, he says, I die contented that we won this victory, or that we won this battle. He was a pretty dedicated soldier as far as the Patriot forces are concerned. And the men kind of have mixed stories about how he ends up being shot. Some say that he got shot in the crossfire. Essentially, maybe his own men shot him accidentally. And then others say that they believe that he was face to face with Patrick Ferguson, who then shot him. I would like to believe that he had that encounter with Ferguson, but I'm inclined to believe that based on the way the battle lines are drawn around this mountain, that it's more likely he probably did get shot by some of his own forces. So out here in this very position that I'm at right now, we have Shelby's men. Patrick Ferguson's men are way up here on this hillside behind me. You might be able to even make out the monument that's up there at the hilltop for the Patriots. But along this line, the Patriots are up, or the British soldiers, the loyalists, are up there waiting. Shelby's men are down here coming up from the hillside. And on that hillside, pickets about a half a mile away from the position that these British soldiers are at. Identify them and spot them, and they take pop shots at them. Well, the Tennesseans are not happy about that. They want to fight back. But the leaders of that unit know that they have to have some element of organization. So they move into position and they tell them to wait until they get the Virginians on the opposite side of their position. finally, when the Virginians move into position, the officer yells out for them to fight like devils and to scream like, basically like natives. So these guys are out here letting out a large yell across the field that sounds a lot like the rebel yell that was famous or infamous in the Confederate Army. And they go up this hillside, and one description of the first volley that was let out here said that the mountainside erupted like a volcano with one long line of fire and sulfur all at the same time. You can imagine being out here during October. Some of the leaves are still on the trees, and then all of a sudden this big fire just erupts, and the loud echo of it hitting the hillside all around. It must have been a sight. Well, as you all know, me and JD from History Underground, we've been walking the fields out here, and we did a pretty good bit on cow pens, and he's going to have a really good story coming up here pretty soon on his channel about the Battle of the Cow Pens and his take on it. And I'm actually going to be in that video myself. But along the way, we talked about an ancestor of his that fought under Sevier's men, which would be roughly in the area I'm at right now. There's a sign right there actually it's talking about Sevier himself, and talking about how before Kings Mountain there had never been a patriot victory with the type of rifles and equipment that they were using at that time against these type of forces, and that at Camden there had actually been a major defeat on the field of some of these men. So he tells a story about his ancestor that fought out here, and matter of fact, I'll just flip the video over to him and he can tell you about his ancestor here in this video. Tell us a little bit about that ancestor.
Yeah, sure. So my 6th great-grandfather was a guy by the name of Abednego Inman. And if anyone is familiar with the Bible, you can guess that he had 2 older brothers named Shadrach and Meshach. So Abednego was the younger brother, and went with Daniel Boone over the Appalachian Mountains. Oh, you're fine. Went with Daniel Boone over the Appalachian Mountains, and they actually got attacked by a band of Cherokee there. He was probably about 15 or 16 years old at the time, and received a wound from a tomahawk on the head.
Wow.
And yeah, the story is he had, of course, a scar that was with him for the rest of his life. And he ended up surviving that ordeal by hiding in a hollow log. His just older brother, so Meshach, he ended up getting killed in that fight. Shadrach was wounded and also survived. So eventually he reconnects with them. But during the Revolutionary War, he's in Tennessee and ended up fighting at the Battle of Kings Mountain. Fought with, I don't know how you pronounce it, Sevier or Sevier, his militia. He's one of the guys who answers the call when Ferguson puts out his threat that he's going to come over the mountain and burn and hang people and everything like that. So yeah, pretty cool too. Yeah, I've got a few ancestors who were in the Revolution. He's one of them. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so one of the over mountain men.
Man, that's something else.
Yeah.
It's always good to find stuff like that, you know, in your history, people that have been involved in major conflicts like that.
Yeah. Yeah,
so,
I'm also an outdoorsman and a hunter and things like that. So, you know, looking at that history and the connection, you know, to Daniel Boone. When I learned that story, I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe there's something inside, you know, that has been passed down that has kind of driven me to kind of be that way.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool. Now that ancestry story that JD just told us about his ancestor fighting here at Kings Mountain under Sevier, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool story. I too had an ancestor that fought here at Kings Mountain from Rutherford County, North Carolina. So it's kind of a neat thing that connects us all here. He's a history guy, I'm a history guy. We both he's got a huge channel. I have this small channel here that I like telling history stories on. We're both into this stuff, and here we are joined in 2025, right at the end of the year, here at Kings Mountain and Cowpens, a place where our ancestors were actually here to forge the future of this nation. I think it's really neat, and I don't think I would end the year in any other way. This has been one heck of an experience out here. And I'm appreciative of him popping in our videos and having us on his channel too. The location I'm headed to right now, you can kind of see off in the distance over here, is a wayside stop here at Kings Mountain. Herbert Hoover came out here to give a speech and talk about the battle and its importance, and essentially dedicate a little bit of time to the anniversary of everything that happened out here. When he shows up, this hillside would be covered in more people at one given time than had ever been out here on this hillside. And here's the monument to that moment. On this site, President Hoover addressed an audience of 75,000 at the celebration of the sesquicentennial of the Battle of Kings Mountain, October 7th, 1930. And there's a sign here that gives a little bit of a visual from that position of what this hill would have looked like during that time. I'll get a little bit closer to it, get the sun out of it. But there's the president, unfortunately, faced all scratched up by some idiot that decided to scratch this up. And there's a picture of Kings Mountain from this vantage point. Imagine 70,000 people covering the landscape out here, 75,000, to hear the president speak. It's pretty amazing. Some of these towns around here don't even have 15,000 people in them. Now, not to leave Virginia out of the fight, we're on that right-hand side. Tennessee's over here on the left-hand side. And the Virginians are out here in this area, coming up from the base of the hill and making their way up through here. Those Virginians are coming from, a lot of them from the Tidewater region. And when I say Tidewater, I'm talking about the Chesapeake, Norfolk area. Those swampy, low-lying areas with big plantations out there. And in this very position, there are a couple of freedmen of color, free black men, that are here fighting with the patriot forces. And there is, on the sign, it talks about one man who was a servant. It says, "And the Colonel's servant, John Brody." There is a monument out here that talks about the men that fought here of African descent. And I'll flip it around so that you can see this monument. And we'll talk about the names that are on the monument and the importance of this being here. It says on this monument, "In honor of the 3 known African-American patriots and others who participated in the Battle of Kings Mountain, Esaias Bowman, John Brody, Andrew Ferguson." This was placed here October 7th, 2016. So now the position I'm walking along, thank goodness, is at the top of the hill. Getting up here can take your breath away, as you probably can tell in some of those clips where I sound like I'm breathing for dear life. But the British are stationed up here. They're in a long line. About 120 redcoats actually are right here in this position I'm at. And they're facing the Tennesseans and the Virginians. It's a pretty rough fight for them. These guys have the advantage. They're coming from a wooded area. They have plenty of coverage. They are coming up a hill. These guys are having to shoot down the hill. Pretty rough take for them to be able to do that. There was a long push to try to get a memorial out here that was bigger than the William Chronicle memorial down at the bottom. And there was a KMCA, which was like a memorial association for Kings Mountain out here, that was trying to gather funds. And in 1879, they were able to make that happen. This is the result of their work. This large monument here memorializing the patriots that died out here. Leading the charge for that memorialization is a man known in the American Civil War as a Confederate colonel, Asbury Coward. He ends up leading this association to make this happen here, and they purchased the 39 acres required in order to save this field, and they put that monument up there to memorialize the men that fell and died here for the start of this nation, the Kings Mountain battle. So it's kind of another ironic thing here on this hillside. A man that's with the Confederate Army previously is the man that really gets this thing kicked off here and is the leader of everything that we see before us today. So to give you a little battlefield orientation, if you will, the Loyalist forces are all along the crest of this hill, this very tippy top here, if you will, stretching all down through here. And that saddle area right around where that monument is the actual encampment of Ferguson. This man sat on top of this hill basically boasting that not anyone could take him off this hill. He was the king of the hill, and that no patriot forces or rebels in hell would be able to remove him from this hill. Not only did he do that, but he sat here and waited for the return of his men. He waited without building any defense works up here, and he only gave some sort of a semblance of defense works by putting baggage around him, around his area here, the camp. Well, when the so-called rebel forces, or the patriots, pushed up here and fought this area, they forced the men back into this position. They were surrounded on all sides. And then some of those loyalists that were in these groups were actually men that had their own homes plundered, and they were forced into service for these loyalist fighting forces. They were forced to be soldiers for the crown. Immediately, when it started looking bad for the loyalist forces, those men threw up surrender flags, and they tried to make their way over to the Patriot side to fight with the Patriots. They completely changed who they were going to fight for. Ferguson, having none of that, would ride around and try to cut down some of these white surrender flags that were popping up all over the place. So if you can imagine this little saddle area here, Ferguson is frantically trying to get these men together. He's probably used to some really well-trained soldiers in His Royal Majesty's Army, and what he's dealing with are a lot of men that have been forced into service, and they really don't want to fight here. They do not want to be killed on top of Kings Mountain. Ferguson, on the other hand, his fate awaits him just on the other side of this hill. So when this hill here, this memorial becomes a really important thing, you start having other things popping up here to honor other men that fought and died here or were wounded here. And here's one that's in honor of Lieutenant Colonel James Hawthorne, commander of Colonel William Hill's regiment, York County troops, in the Battle of Kings Mountain. Colonel Hill, having been disabled by wounds, it says here, received in a former engagement. Pretty new, pretty neat. It was put here in 1949, it looks like. Just another stone monument here at the base of this massive monument to Kings Mountain. Real neat thing to see. It's just another thing you can see out here at Kings Mountain National Battlefield. I'm in the position that's marked saying that here Ferguson fell. And if that's the case, you can kind of see Ferguson's been frantically going back and forth between that position at the top there, where his soldiers had to get into that saddle and kind of be cornered into that position, back and forth between here and there. And at this location, Patrick Ferguson is shot. And some accounts say he was hit at least 5 or 6 times. And he falls off the horse. And the horse itself, the bridle or the leg harness catches his leg as he comes out. And he is dragged around this field by his horse. Eventually, they pull him off his horse and they prop him up against a tree here, somewhere closer to the bottom down here. And as they place him up down there, he's breathing his last breaths and he's basically bleeding to death and dying here at Kings Mountain. But what's important about this position, when I said my ancestors were here too, they came from Rutherford County. And they were down here at the base of this hill. And just down there you can make out a pile of rocks. That's Ferguson's grave. Well, in this area, McDowell's men from Rutherford County are actually coming up through this hill, and they are being forced back down the hill multiple times by a bayonet charge from these loyalist forces here. Well, there's a man on this field by the name of Branson and another man on this field by the name of Withrow. Withrow's in those forces that we're talking about. Branson gets mortally wounded and he's hurting real bad up here. Well, his relative happens to be Withrow here with the Patriot forces, and he looks to him for help and he's calling out for help from him. And Withrow looks at him and says, "Look to your friends for help." I mean, you want to talk about a civil war? That's about as much of a civil war as you can get. These guys are living in the same neighborhoods. They're related to each other, and he's asking him for help because he's dying. And Withrow straight up says, "I'm not your friend anymore. You can turn to your friends for help," which are these loyalist forces that are up here that are being butchered one by one. It's pretty amazing. And that's also why the anger happens near the end of this fight and that march when they take those soldiers out of here. They're pretty peeved about these guys taking the side of the crown and not standing with them to fight for independence. So remember we said DePeyster was going to come back into the picture for Musgrove Mill. Well, roughly in this area up here on the hill, DePeyster's men are going to come in to reinforce the fight that's happening here, but it's just too late. Ferguson himself, realizing he might be taken captive, ends up trying to break through these lines, and he's slashing. He ends up breaking his sword in the process, and as he's heading out through these lines, trying to get away from here, he ends up being shot about 7 to 8 times, some say 6 times. One of the men that witnessed his body said that he witnessed that the man must have been shot at least 50 times, that 7 bullets had entered his body, both of his arms were broken, and that 1 had entered his head. Some accounts say that they witnessed him up against a tree, that he may have been at the moment of dying. But to me, if the man's got a bullet in his head and both of his arms are broken, he's pretty much dead. He was buried here with cowhide wrapped around his body, and he's supposedly buried here with Virginia Sal, one of the young ladies that was from the area that was with him here, supposedly for his services, in other words, to launder his clothing and things like that, but they also think that she was possibly a mistress as well, along with another woman here by the name of Virginia. It's just something about Virginia for old Patrick Ferguson. But one of the traditions that we like to do out here in the foothills of Carolina is we like to put a rock on old Ferguson's grave here. As you can see, he's got quite a pile. I myself have probably put a few on here as a kid, and what a way to ring in the new year. Keep the old man down. Well, as you can imagine from this victory here at Kings Mountain, it's a pretty big deal. The local areas hear about it. All these people who are afraid to fight the British and have had their homes plundered are now starting to feel bold. They know it's possible. They know that local mountain men are able to mount an attack and fight some pretty supreme forces. So this is really good for recruiting. They were able to get a lot more men involved, and eventually the Flying Army makes its way in to this area with Dan Morgan. We're going to make our way over to Cowpens. We're going to tell the story of the Battle of Cowpens in some pretty good detail. It's a very unique fight that happens over there, and one of my favorite battlefields in all of the United States. Well, we've had a fantastic time here at Kings Mountain. We're heading over to Cowpens now to cover the story over there. And we're going to have JD out there with us as well. So until next time, the next video in this segment, this is History with Waffles.